Okay, so this is the first chapter, chapter 20 in our fifth part, which is all about biochemistry. And so this chapter focuses mainly on proteins. So first of all, just a side note on proteins. Proteins make up about 70%, 75% of your weight. And this is your dry mass, not including all of your water weight, because the majority of your body is made up out of water. So one of these types of proteins is a lot of times polymers of alpha amino acids, which sounds really complicated, but it's not. Basically, an amino acid is an organic compound that contains an amine, and an amine is a nitrogen-containing functional group, and you can recognize it by looking for the nitrogen. And also, amino acids also have a carboxylic acid, and one way that you can see that is you're looking for COOH, and I'll show you an example in just a second. The alpha in alpha amino acid is telling you that there is only one carbon between those two groups, and when I'm talking about these two groups, I'm talking about my nitrogen and I'm talking about my carboxylic acid. And there's also usually one more group, and this one additional group can usually vary, and so they just like to call it R. So our amine is this NH group right here. This is our amine. The COOH over here is our carboxylic acid. And then if you notice, this alpha means that it is separated by one carbon, right smack dab in between our amine and our carboxylic acid. And then, like I said, we have an R group that can vary depending on what amino acid we are talking about, but there is going to be something else there, so we just put an R there to represent there's one more group. So let's spend a little bit more time talking about amino acids. So first of all, there's 150 amino acids found in living organisms, but really there's only 20 that are commonly found in proteins, and actually all but one exist in left and right-handed forms. So this is kind of a new concept, this whole left versus right-handed forms, and the best way I can explain this to you is look at your hands. Your left hand and your right hands are mirror images of each other. They look identical, but they're actually the exact opposite. Well, proteins occur in the exact same way. Usually they occur in two forms, and they may look identical, but they're actually the exact opposite or mirror images of one another. The only one that is not found in both the left and right-handed form is glycine. And usually the only version of amino acids that are found in proteins are usually your left-handed version. So the right-handed versions exist, it's just that they are not used in the same way as we use the left-handed versions in our proteins. So when we're also talking about amino acids, we have to use this concept of essential versus non-essential. So essential means that they cannot be synthesized by your body. So in order for you to obtain these essential amino acids, you have to get them out of your diet. And if you do not have a certain amount in your diet, it usually causes some sort of deficiency diseases. A non-essential amino acid is ones that your body can make from other compounds that your body already contains. And so these are, yes, essential for life, but at the same time, your body can generate them from things it already has. You don't have to intake them. And so if we look at our 20 amino acids that are used to make proteins, these are all the ones listed, and you can see their structures here, and that's a little more advanced than we're going to get into. But if you notice, every single one of these has an amine and a carboxylic acid, and an amine and a carboxylic acid, and an amine and a carboxylic acid. And it goes, repeats. Every single one of them has the exact same structure. They all have an amine and a carboxylic acid. The only thing that is changing is this R group. And if you notice, every single one of these has a completely different R group. And so this is what makes them have different aspects. This is what makes them have different properties. This is what makes them work differently in your body. And if you also notice, I have starred the ones that are essential. Essential meaning the ones that we have to obtain from other sources, the ones that we have to eat. And so all the ones with the stars are the ones that are essential, which means we get them from their diet. The other ones are important as well. It's just our body can make these from other things, so they're the non-essential amino acids. Okay, so carboxylic acids usually react with amines to produce amides. Okay, and so we're going to be doing a lot of vocabulary today, and I promise you it's not so bad. But a polyamide, poly usually means many, so a polyamide is going to mean lots of amides all put together. And this is an example, this would be nylons, and these are react diacids. So basically what happens is you react diacids, which are molecules with two heads. If you remember back when we were talking about polarity and we were talking about soaps and detergents, and we would draw things with a head and a tail, and this was our polar end, and this was a non-polar end. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying we have a molecule with two heads versus one with two tails. And so polyamides are when you take diacids, which are molecules with two heads, so basically it's going to be polar on both sides, and you react this with a diamine, which is a molecule with two tails. Usually when they combine, they are going to do something called an amide linkage, and this is usually called a peptide linkage, which you guys have probably all heard of peptide bonds before. And so we're kind of amino acids, this all kind of goes together when we're talking about these peptide bonds. And so let's specifically talk about some proteins now. We've been talking about amino acids. Amino acids make up proteins. So let's switch gears and let's actually talk about these proteins now. So a protein, first of all, can be various lengths, okay? 2 to 10 amino acids, these are called oligopeptides. 10 to 15 amino acids are called polypeptides, and if it is bigger than 50 amino acids, we call these proteins. Typically, proteins are 20 amino acids long, and there's a typo right there. I'm so sorry, I should fix that. But typically, a protein is 200 amino acids long. So we have to have a different combination of 200 amino acids all making up one protein. The structure and the function is determined by the sequence of amino acids. So if you think back to that picture I just showed you of all of the different, let me just put it back up here for you. Okay, if we look at this picture and we look at all the 20 different amino acids, in order to make one protein, we are going to put 200 of these all together, working together in one chain. And so you can see that the variations are endless. We can have so many different combinations of these amino acids all working in different ways. And so that is why when we're looking at proteins, the structure and the function is determined on the sequence of your amino acids. So it just depends on what order, which one you start with, which one you end with, which ones are in the middle. And again, 200 proteins long gives you endless possibilities. Since it could be kind of cumbersome to stand there and draw out all of these structures, nobody wants to do that for 200 amino acids in one protein chain, we actually start to use a 3-letter prefix. And so when they are talking about a specific protein, they will refer to amino acids by this 3-letter prefix that you see here. And so based on what it is in the order, we are able to determine what protein we have. Okay, so there are two main types of proteins. The first one is structural proteins, and they do exactly what it sounds like they do. These are responsible for the shape of an organism it takes on. These are what gives your cells structure. These are what allows you to stand up tall and have all of the characteristics that go with that. And so structural proteins are very regular and they have a 3D structure. They kind of have a helical shape, and when I think helical shape, I think of DNA all kind of wound in together, and it's not the exact same shape, but that's what pops into my mind, and it'll kind of give you a visual as to what it looks like. And I'm going to show you a picture here in just a second. And they have a helical shape, and they're actually technically called an alpha helix. So like, for example, one example of a structural protein is A-keratin. These have 3 alpha helical proteins all coiled around each other. And kind of an analogy, it's kind of like if you put a whole bunch of spaghetti noodles all together and wound them within each other. This is what it looks like. Now, A-keratin is actually an example of this would be like your hair or your wool or your fingernails. They're very strong, very durable. They are actually held together with something called a disulfide linkage, this is how perms work. Basically what happens is you use an acid to break all of the bonds, all of the disulfide bonds in your hair, and then you coil it around the shape that you want your hair to take on. And then as it's coiled around this, usually a round shape, because usually people who get perms want their hair to be curly, they then soak your hair in hydrogen peroxide, which then reforms the bond in this new orientation. And then you let it sit there for a while to make sure all of the bonds are reformed. Then after that, your hair is still your hair. It's just you have broken all the bonds and you've restructured this alpha keratin protein in the direction that you want, in the shape that you want. This is why when you're getting your hair permed, it smells really bad and it smells like sulfur, because you're breaking all those disulfide bonds. Now, disulfide or perms are not permanent. They're permanent on the hair that you give them to, but as your hair starts to grow out, they will be in the natural form that your hair normally is in. Another example, or some more examples of structural proteins, are myosin and actin. These are your muscle fibers. Epidermin, this is your skin. Elastin, these are your ligaments. Fibrin, these are blood clots. And then you have collagen, which is your connective tissues like tendons, ligaments, cartilage, bone, skin. All of these are structural proteins which give you the structure to stand up and move around and do all of the movements that you want to do. And over here, you can see that I tried to find a nice picture for you to kind of give you what a structural protein looks like. And if you notice, they kind of all wind together. And if you look at this very last one, it's easier for you to see. It's like you take a whole bunch of pieces of spaghetti and you twist them and wind them all together until they are able to support a lot of weight and structure and hold their own. Okay, the second type of protein we're going to talk about is a globular protein. These are coiled strands in a very random pattern. Honestly, these types of proteins, they look like you just have a whole bunch of things all thrown together. It's like when you're going to get balloons for whatever reason and they coil the end of the ribbon and there's really no rhyme or reason to the coil. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. This is what these types of proteins look like to me. However, it is not as it seems. Just because it looks like it's a mess of craziness doesn't mean that it is. Every bend on these proteins is on purpose. Every single protein is coiled in the exact same way. And if you change the direction in one tiny little bend, it can change the function of the protein completely. And so even though it looks like a mess and a craziness, it's really not. It's actually very on purpose, and it's very important that the structure stays the same. So a couple of examples of these types of proteins is, first of all, enzymes. Enzymes are very, very important in your body, and what they are is they actually are catalysts. Now, catalyst is something that makes a reaction happen faster, and so enzymes are very important in your body because they make your chemical reactions in your body happen faster, and they actually make them happen 10 to the 8 to 10 to the 11 times faster. Now, since it's been a while since we've done scientific notation, when I say 10 to the 8, I mean 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I ran out of room, 11, that many times faster. And so it can drastically change the effect and the speed of a chemical reaction, which doesn't sound important, but our chemical reactions that happen in our body happen so slowly that if it were not for the enzymes, they just probably would just not happen at all. So our body process would greatly be affected, it would greatly be changed and altered, and we would start to have a lot of issues. Another thing about enzymes is this is kind of how your metabolism works. They use enzymes to help break down food so your body can use it for energy, because your body doesn't need the food that you eat in the exact form that it needs it. They need different parts of the food that you eat. So we have to have something that breaks it down. And so when we're talking about metabolism, we're talking about catabolism, which is the breakdown of molecules. Okay, these uses various different enzymes that are located in your saliva, your stomach, your digestive tract. They can break down lipids, they can break down nucleic acid. These items all break down your food molecules into what your body needs. And so then your body can then absorb the various proteins that it needs, and the different organ systems can absorb what they need, as opposed to, here's some food, take it or leave it. And so it just really helps speed up your body's process in absorbing the energy. That's why when you eat something, you instantly start to feel better and you start to feel energies, because your body is being able to absorb these things a lot faster. The opposite of it is anabolism, and basically what this is, instead of breaking it down, it builds up complex molecules. So maybe you're eating something and your body doesn't quite need it in that form, but it doesn't need to break it down. It actually needs to add something additional to it so that your body can absorb it more quickly. There's actually enzymes that can make bonds and make various things that your body needs. And so to kind of give you a visual of what enzymes are doing, let's look at this picture. And basically, let's assume this is whatever you've ate for lunch. Okay, and whatever you ate for lunch is two different forms. So I don't know, say this is, you had chili for lunch. Let's say this is chili. And so your body isn't going to use it exactly in that form. So down here is your enzyme. And so what happens is your food goes into the enzyme. And if you notice, the enzyme has a specific spot, and the shape of the enzyme is identical to the shape of whatever it is trying to break down. And so as it goes into the site, the enzyme then reads it, and it starts to break it apart into what your body needs. And then after it breaks it apart, it then spits it back out into things that your body can easily absorb or easily need. And so if it weren't for enzymes, I don't know if our body could ever break down the food in the way that we would need them to use it properly. Okay, another type of globular proteins are hormones, and hormones are very, 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 very important to your body. Basically what hormones do is they are messenger molecules that travel from one of the endocrine glands to other organs in your body. So they're actually transporting messages like, I need more blood sugar, I don't have enough, or I have too much blood sugar and I need some taken away. They help to regulate things in your body so that the processes, so your body is working together, not against one another. And so oftentimes hormones are transported through the blood or your lymphatic system. They are not always proteins. Some are steroids, but the majority of hormones are proteins. So one example of a hormone that we use a lot is insulin. This is actually made in the pancreas. What it does is it tells the liver to remove sugar from the bloodstream. So after you eat dinner, or after you eat a whole bunch of candy or cake, or honestly anytime you eat anything, there's probably a significant amount of sugar in it. Insulin is telling your body that there is too much sugar in your bloodstream, and so it tells it to start removing that sugar from their bloodstream to help to keep it maintained at a normal rate. Then the opposite of insulin is glucagon, and what it does is when our blood sugar levels start to get low, it instructs the liver to start putting the sugar back into the bloodstream. And this way, it's kind of like it's putting the sugar levels away for a rainy day, so that even when you're not currently eating, your body has sugar released into its bloodstream for energy for your muscles and your body functions, regardless of if you're currently eating, because most of us don't walk around eating 24 hours a day. And so this process of insulin and glucagon working together helps maintain our bodies in a state where we have energy all the time. However, insulin and glucagon aren't always a perfect match. There's actually, you guys have all heard of diabetes before. What happens in diabetes? Well, there's two types. The first type, type 1, basically what happens is sometime in usually childhood is when type 1 usually takes place. Your immune system turns on your pancreas for some reason, and we're really not sure why it happens. But your immune system starts to attack the pancreas and kills all of your insulin-creating cells. And so without those insulin-creating cells there, your body can no longer send signals to your liver to start to filter sugar out of your bloodstream. And so then your sugar level starts to rise, which can cause a whole bunch of problems in your mental state and your body functions working properly. Type 2 diabetes is kind of the opposite. Basically what happens is your pancreas is still making insulin. The process is still working. However, your body is no longer sensitive to insulin or insulin production. And so when your body releases insulin saying we have too much sugar in the blood, your liver doesn't really interpret that signal correctly, and so it doesn't start to filter the sugar out. And so when your liver's not following the rules of your insulin, your blood sugar starts to increase, it starts to get too high, and then again you have the same issues with the mental state. You're not being able to think properly, you're not being able to do all the body functions that you're used to. You just kind of get really groggy and everything, and that's just all honestly because your liver is not filtering blood sugar out. And so a lot of times people that are diabetic, they have to take insulin shots and monitor it regularly to keep their blood levels at the correct spot. Some more of these examples are your adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is ACTH. This is actually produced in your pituitary gland, which is at the base of your skull. What this hormone does is it stimulates your adrenal gland, aka which is close to your kidneys, and it tells it to produce hormones. And it basically, it's telling your body what to filter out, what you need to keep, what you don't need to keep, what should be filtered out, what needs to pass through. And so it's this hormone going from your adrenal gland to your kidneys, telling your body how it should work properly. Another example is thyroxine, which is technically your thyroid gland, and this is what regulates your metabolism. And so if the hormone is not being sent to your thyroid gland enough, then it can affect your metabolism. If too much is being sent, and it can affect your thyroid gland. And so basically, if too much signal is sent, you're going to have hypothyroidism, which means your thyroid gland is working overdrive, which means your metabolism is really fast. These people are usually really thin, and they're always hungry, and they have a hard time gaining weight. If you don't get enough of this hormone sent to your thyroid gland, you will have hypothyroidism, and this means your metabolism is really slow. And so these people gain weight really easily. They have a hard time losing weight. They usually don't have a lot of energy, so on and so forth. Another example of something that is really needed to help this process is iodine. Iodine is the thyroid gland is the only thing, or the only main process in your body that needs iodine. If you do not have enough iodine, it can cause some serious problems with your thyroid gland. And so we used to have a lot of issues with this, but I believe back in the 1940s or 1950s, they started making iodized salt. And basically, whenever you salt anything, your body is intaking a little bit of iodine, which it doesn't need a lot. It just needs enough to make this process work properly. And so ever since we started making iodized salt, it's been lessening the amount of these disorders that we've been having. Some other hormones that I like to talk about are oxytocin. This hormone is very important in mothers who are getting ready to have a baby. Honestly, oxytocin is what is used to cause contractions. A lot of times, women can be given Pitocin. Pitocin is like the prescription name for oxytocin. It can be given to women to start the contraction process if they're not going into labor on their own. Oxytocin also aids in milk production when they're nursing their baby, and so the levels are very, very, very high when women are going through that process. Another one is vasopressin, and basically what these do is they regulate water balance in the body. So if you have increased receptors, this has shown to increase. Actually, before we talk about that, let's look up here at this picture. So the top one is oxytocin. The bottom one is vasopressin. So if we look at these, if we look at our amino acid groups, we can see that it's cysteine, tyrosine, so on and so forth down the line. And if we look, they are identical in every single spot except for the third amino acid and the 8th amino acid. Doesn't look like a huge difference, but it has a huge difference in their functions, what they're doing. Because just like I said, oxytocin is used to cause contractions in giving birth and in milk production in nursing. And vasopressin is used to regulate water balance in the body. And so those are two completely different functions. But since they are so similar in structure, scientists often wonder if there's some sort of connection in there. So they've actually done some studies in some mammals, and what they have noticed that if you have an increased vasopressin receptors, it has also shown an increase in monogamy, which means those males in those certain types of mammals are more apt to stay with one spouse as opposed to having different mates throughout their life. And they're also more apt to bond with their offspring. And so by studying different mammals, some mammals mate more than once, some mate for life, some have a big part in their fathering of their children, some don't do anything. And so what they have noticed is that the amount of their vasopressin receptors, if they are increased, they are more likely to have one mate and bond with their offspring. So it's just kind of, who knows, we're not quite there yet, but there might be a link there somewhere, probably because the structure is so similar. Okay, these types of protein are also very important when we're talking about transport and storage. We've talked about hemoglobin several times this unit, but hemoglobin is our oxygen carrying component of red blood cells. And what they do, they consist of 4 protein chains, which means that it can bind 4 oxygen at a time. Well, since one red blood cell can have 300 million hemoglobins in it, each cell can technically transport 1.2 billion oxygens per cell. And so this is why your oxygen can travel through your body so quickly, is because one red blood cell can technically transport so much oxygen, and that's why it is so easy for your body to stay oxygenated, because one blood cell can transport so much. Another transport and storage is myoglobin. And what these are, they're very, very similar to hemoglobin because they transport oxygen, but they don't transport oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body and then back to your lungs. They store oxygen in your muscle cells. And so this is it's like they're stashing oxygen away for a rainy day. So this is why when you hold your breath, your heart still beats. This is why when you're underwater and you're swimming, your heart still beats. But this is also why you can only live for so long without breathing, is because you technically only have so much oxygen stored in these myoglobin cells. And so, yes, they're there and they're stashing it for a rainy day. So if you can't breathe for a little while, it's going to be okay. But at the same time, there's only so much that they can store at a time. And so it's not a perfect science. Another thing that I like to talk about in this section is antibodies. Antibodies make up they are very active in your transport system in your body. And let's talk about a leukocyte, which is technically a white blood cell. The whole purpose of these is to fight against disease. What these do is they are released in response to antigens. Antigens are markers on foreign cells. And so when a foreign cell enters your body or your bloodstream, there's antigens on the outside of all of your cells. And usually foreign cells have different antigens on the outside of it. So when your body sees those different antigens, it goes, what in the world is that? And so it tells your immune system to fight it off and to get rid of it and to destroy it. And so this is how your immune system works. And so some other examples is like blood types. If you have type A blood and you get type B blood, well, type B has different antigens than type A. And so your body's going to see type B blood as a foreign cell and it's going to attack it and it's going to kick it out of the system. However, if you're transfused with type A blood, your body is it's going to recognize the antigens and it's going to think that it's its own blood, and so it's not going to be as big of an issue. Another way that we can use this is vaccinations. And vaccinations were actually discovered somebody noticed that milkmaids who usually did not get smallpox. And the reason they didn't get smallpox is because they actually would get something called cowpox. And this cowpox, what they noticed is anybody who had this somehow would no longer get smallpox. And so what they did is I believe they tested it on, one of the scientists tested it on his son or another young boy, maybe of someone he knew. He tested it to see, well, let's give him cowpox vaccine, because cowpox, you do get a little bit sick, but you don't really suffer really bad, and so it's not going to kill you. And so he injected this person with cowpox, and he then, after he had time to get over it, he then injected them with smallpox, and what he noticed was that the cowpox antigen was so similar to the smallpox antigen that when the body saw it, it would fight it off just like it was cowpox. And so since the body was already used to it and had already seen it, it was a lot easier for it to fax it off. So this is where we get vaccines. So how vaccines work is basically they use heat or a chemical to weaken the virus or the bacteria. So they treat it to the virus or the bacteria. They then inject it into the patient. Now, since this virus is weak, it's not going to be able to reproduce and spread fast enough in your body. Your body's going to be able to kill it relatively quickly. Well, since your body has exposure to it, it can then recognize the antigens and kind of send a message to the rest of your body saying, we have a foreign invader that looks like this. If you see it, make sure that we get rid of it really quickly. And so then if you come into contact with this bacteria or the flu or whatever later on down the line, your body has already been exposed to it, so it knows it's an enemy right off the bat. And so it can kill it, hopefully, before it can start to reproduce and duplicate in your body. Okay, however, Your immune system doesn't always work perfectly. Okay, it can misbehave. And so sometimes it has an overreaction to things that aren't necessarily a bad thing that needs to be fought off. And so some of these symptoms are very annoying, like allergies. Okay, allergies are very annoying. You have a stuffy nose just because you breathe in pollen. Pollen's not going to hurt you. It's not an invader. It's not trying to kill you. But your body doesn't see it that way. And so it makes once you get the pollen, it makes a response to it. And so you get all the scratchy eyes, the runny nose, the stuffy nose, everything like that. And this is also why babies generally don't have allergies, because in order to have an allergy, you have to first be exposed to something that your body deems as foreign or a danger. Some of these can actually be life-threatening, and you guys have probably all heard of anaphylactic shock. Some people, when they get exposed to something that they're allergic to, their whole body starts to attack it, and they get short of breath, they can't breathe, their face turns red, they start having all of these other things. And so a lot of times this is when people who have severe allergies, like peanut allergies, they carry around an EpiPen, because it tells you when they get the EpiPen, it releases a thing telling all the histamine, which histamine is what causes all of these allergic reactions really fast. The histamine is released into the blood system, making your body do all these annoying things. And so basically the EpiPen is telling all the histamine to stay put and not do what it's supposed to do. This can also lead to autoimmune diseases where the body attacks itself. And so some examples of autoimmune diseases are like diabetes, which I've already talked about, multiple sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis. And so these are all where your immune system is not working the way it's supposed to, and instead of killing off danger or invading particles, it's killing off your own cells that are good, and so it can cause some other complications along the way.